Michelle, thank you so much for joining us on Social Impact Power Chats.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so great to see this come to life.
I mean, and it was a glimmer in my eye when we first connected. So beyond honored and delighted to have you. Um, we will jump in as we do. And our first question is always the same, which is how did you get into this, beautiful ecosystem that we call social impact?
I mean, there is the long version, there's the short version. So I
We'll
think
take short plus. Give me
well,
short plus.
we'll do short plus. I come from the nonprofit sector. I had founded and led a human rights nonprofit in New York for a very long time, and I'm a lawyer. So that was focused on legal services, and everything that we were doing there was centered around the work. But I realized as a founder, I also had a responsibility to steward the culture. And so I started, I was kind of like a proto general counsel. Don't worry, I wasn't really our general counsel, but thinking about the policies of the organization. And like, I was the first person to take leave at our organization. So I had to write that policy and all the things that kind of like an HR department, if we had had one, would have done. And I got really invested in mentoring the younger female attorneys that were coming up in our organization and just encountering all those things. And it was 12 years. And so the pandemic hit. I moved from New York to Oakland, which is that lemon tree behind me, and decided like it was time to step down. I really do think that when like a founder leader is ready to go, they should, make that jump and the organization can fly. And that's what happened. And I had my second kiddo and was like, thinking about a lot of different things. And I really realized that in that kind of second, like half of my tenure, I was really interested in working in the private sector, and really taking the things that I'd learned and kind of jumping into the private sector with this mission of working with parents. It wasn't something that I started like doing necessarily, but it's something that as I encountered that lived experience, I really wanted to touch on. And I thought there was a lot of analogies and a lot of ways that I could take my learnings from the nonprofit sector and bring it to the private sector. And the stars all aligned. That is definitely a longer story, but I found an opportunity at Bobbie, which is an organic infant formula company, led by and founded by mothers. And I met them, and there wasn't really a role for me when I met them. But then, as some folks may know, there was a national infant formula shortage, and so I reached back out, and we realized that there was a lot of work to do together. And so I'll just leave it at that
Yeah.
as like
No,
starting place.
the perfect this is the perfect place to to take us to the next question, which is okay, you are living a very powerful act two. You saw what you wanted, and you now you have harnessed it, you've manifested it. So tell us just a little bit about your day to day and the work that you're doing, the work you're leading on the social impact side of Bobbie and Bobbie for Change.
Yeah, for sure. So I think Bobbie is really unique in that there was this vision of impact and mission from its inception. From like the organization has only been around for 4 years. And before even we launched a product into market, before I was there was a gap that was noticed. I think someone actually reached out into our DMs and said like, "Hey, I'm impacted by breast cancer. I don't have breasts. But is formula covered? I'd love to use Bobbie. I hear that you're, coming into market. Is there an opportunity here?" And unfortunately, the Affordable Care Act, it turns out, doesn't cover formula for folks who can't nurse or choose not to, or in surrogacy situation, adoption. And so they started this program called, the Bobbie Breasties. We ended up partnering with the Breasties nonprofit to provide a year of free formula for folks in the situation. And so the first year it was four individuals. This year it's 121. We're in our fourth cohort. So the seeds of the mission were really there. And when I heard about Bobbie, I was like, oh, this is really interesting, because it had a lot of the mission and vision was intersecting with my own current lived experience. And there was an alignment, like a universal kind of kismet, whatever you want to call it, alignment with my values and the values of the organization. But the reason why I say it's unique is because I also think that to start doing like give back work before you even like have a vision of, are we going to
Right.
have an impact arm? Is there a nonprofit? Like what's happening here? Was just like, no, we're going to go boom, boom, boom. We're going to do this. And then also to then launch an impact and policy arm so early into the life cycle of the organization is very unique. So what I do on a daily basis is I do a lot of different things, but we are focused on several pillars. We're focused on maternal mortality. We're focused on helping folks who are impacted by breast and gynecologic, and even, broader than that, cancers who medically can't nurse, or again, who choose not to, or have a surrogacy or adoption experience, to access formula through the Affordable Care Act, or some other mechanism. We work with folks who've had rapid response needs. So, tornadoes, natural disasters of different types, and industry reform writ large for the formula industry, which is really in grave need of reform. And so we work on those through policy and advocacy, giving, and I think that's it. There is more, but we try with our nonprofit partners, and that is really like the way in which we intersect with the work is through grassroots nonprofit organizations, mostly led by people who are directly impacted by the issues, proximate leaders, and really smaller organizations. So all of them are, mostly under $1 million in budget, but mostly they're like more like the less than 300,000 in budget. So that's where I take my experience as a nonprofit leader and founder, and we really provide a lot of technical expertise and connection with different resources to our nonprofit leaders.
It's amazing. And, just to put it kind of in ethos parlance, one of the things that I love about you all is that you live this ecosystem that we talk about all the time. You're giving cash, product, you're doing advocacy, you're really partnering with organizations. So there's so many things in our pillars that you're living. I'm wondering if you can, I'm sure we could talk for the next hour and a half and not exhaust examples, but if you could just peel back the onion on one or two of those initiatives that you've taken down the field, and maybe give us a little bit of secret sauce if somebody's listening, and so many of us are following along what you all are doing right now. It's super inspiring.
So
give folks a little bit of a recipe.
Yeah, I mean, so if I only had 2 seconds to say recipe, it's mission and dollars. You have to believe in it and you have to commit money to it. Like, that's it. So that's something that we obviously have and that we do. But then there's obviously more. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, because there's a little bit of a recency bias, and you're well aware of this campaign, is the Parents Push Harder campaign that we just launched in January. And why it's really interesting is I think it's like we launched Bobbie For Change in January of 2023. So we really just launched a year ago, and we went like whole hog on several different initiatives in our pillars. But paid leave wasn't one of those pillars. And I actually didn't mention that when I just was talking about our pillars. It's actually become, one of our biggest pillars. But as an organization, the brand Bobbie has had these beautiful, progressive, really parent-forward leave policies, and actually democratized our leave. Sarah Hardy, our chief people officer and co-founder, she put together with the people team this beautiful, evolving leave, which we added a NICU policy basically overnight to 8 months ago when one of our employees was in the NICU. Joe, she's amazing. And we shared through Take Our Leave, we called it, we have a microsite, and we shared it. We added that to the Bobbie For Change ecosystem, one of our pillars, because that is really the need of our consumers, and our employees. The vast majority of our employees at Bobbie are parents. So it's this really interesting, like, corporate example of folks who are directly impacted by an issue too. We really live a lot of the same experiences of our consumers, which is really fun and unique. And I love seeing it, because we're all so in it together, because we're all fighting for the same things, and our values and our goals are really aligned. So Parents Push Harder is around pushing for federal paid leave. And we have a MotherBoard, which is our parent activists, and they're of note. They are celebrities or athletes and people of influence. And we know that when you become a parent, you become an activist. You see the world in a way that you maybe never noticed it before, that the world and the systems that are out here for modern parents isn't really built for us. And we need to really fight for a world that is built for us. And so Naomi Osaka, some may know as a tennis player and a 4-time Grand Slam champion. She also is a new mother, and she's on our MotherBoard. And she wanted to talk about paid leave and fight for paid leave. And so this was the first time that we brought the Bobbie For Change directly to our brand campaign in a really, really tight, integral way. And it's had a beautiful result. So we had a New York Times ad. We had a beautiful hero videos telling her story. She got a lot of pushback for wanting to go back to work on her own terms. To some, it was soon after she had her child, how she feeds her baby. So everything, does also line back up to how you feed your baby, because that is what we do. And we brought in 3 nonprofit partners, Chamber of Mothers, Paid Leave for All, and Moms First, who were part of our New York Times ad. We brought in creators to tell their stories on Instagram. And we've had several different hits to it. One piece is this grant piece where we said, okay, the Family Act, which is what's on offer for federal paid leave right now, would pay $580 as a minimum if passed. And so we said, okay, we're going to offer, with this ecosystem of folks, $580 grants to 50 people. Well, we got almost 11,000 applications, and we said, like, these are people who took the time, who have a really massive need. That $580 is incremental to their life. How can we steward these stories and do more? And so we use LinkedIn as an organizing tool to bring in other brands and help them have a way to give back. So we did a call out, and the first call out was, I think, for 65 or 68 additional grants with 18 brands. And then we have a second wave that's coming up. I don't know if I'm allowed to say. Folks at Ethos are involved and donating to that. And so it's a way at any level, in increments of 580, that we can bring change and the opportunity to connect with change to brands as well, who are mission aligned, and who the private sector, we know, is incredibly persuasive to our lawmakers, who we have a direct line of communication with, because we do go to DC and we lobby for these initiatives.
It's brilliant. And, we're super proud to be involved and really appreciated the opportunity to do so easily. From my perspective, it's a great initiative. We can say yes. And you've done all the work. And I think that's just a great call out. People are still living in like a fiefdom mentality. And I think the truth is, if you raise your hand and say, hey, we're in a moment of expansiveness, you'll get folks to join you. And you saw that how many hours did it take to get that coalition together, really?
I mean, not many.
Yeah, like in a day, you had your
Yeah.
your proof
Now,
point.
the execution of, the communications, building the assets, continuing to think about how we storytell, what is the future of the coalition, all those things, that obviously takes more time. But I love what you just said. I mean, there is so much power in numbers. And I think, like, we need all of us to make change. I deeply feel that. I deeply believe that. And, like, this is a win-win for everybody. And so it's been really, really fun. I know this is kind of meta, because this will live on LinkedIn, in some way. Yeah. LinkedIn, I think, is a really kind of underutilized resource still. And I love that, we use social media as an organizing tool. I love that LinkedIn can be an organizing tool for other companies, for other brands. I love that, like, there were solopreneurs that have jumped in, and then much bigger companies, and we can all come in on equal footing, and we can have this joint perspective to say, like, we're showing up in this way, government, now meet us halfway. And it's so much stronger than just Bobbie alone. And so, like, we also had a sign-on letter, so you don't even need to write a check. You can be a part of this sign-on letter. And I think that is an important piece of change to help educate, because I think every brand that we want to be associated with wants to do good in the world, and they don't always know how. So you mentioned, like, you made it easy. So there was a labor component, but I also think there's an education component. And I think that, because I'm a human rights lawyer and I have, like, a policy background and can kind of help, like, navigate the laws in a particular way, that is, like, a unique offering that I have in my space and in my role, because I bring that lens to it. I don't think it's necessary, of course, for all impact folks, but if it is something that we have as unique or beneficial in some way, we love to give it to our partners who are aligned, to be like, let's just do this together. This can be really fun, which I love. I love, like, bringing joy to it.
100%. And that you've open sourced this is hugely beneficial. And for anybody listening who thinks this is a cool idea in a different issue area, you too can open source your work. And I think there's just an incredible playbook that Michele and the team at Bobbie have shown us. So, go and read the receipts, check out all of the posts, and it's an incredible learning. I'm so, sad because I could speak to you, as I said, forever and ever, but we're at our last question. And, because it's a power chat, these things go fast. And the last question is the future. What are you seeing coming down the field? Where are you putting your time? And if you had, $100 to bet on where impact is headed, where would you put your bet?
Mm. I mean, I really think it's important to support Black-led nonprofit organizations. When you look at the numbers, when I mentioned that only 92% of nonprofits are at a million, make it over, or 92% of nonprofits are less than $1 million in budget. Of those, if you look at the numbers, Black-led organizations are much smaller in budget. But I think the numbers range somewhere from like 45,000, and mostly volunteer run is a third of the Black-led nonprofits out there. So it's really important to think about where dollars are going, and not every, impact arm has a ton of resources. So it's like thinking about what are the value that you can provide to the organizations that you work with that are on the ground doing the work. And I think it's dollars, it's technical expertise, it's other in-kind resources that you can provide. It is Black History Month. I don't know if this is airing, but it does feel
reference. It probably won't air in February, but it's an important thing to
I
mention.
think obviously it's more, it's beyond February. And so I think just thinking really critically about dollars and what leaders they're going to and where you can actually make the most incremental impact.
Yeah.
I think it's focusing on Black-led nonprofit organizations.
Brilliant. Well, Michele, you've given us so much food for thought from minute 1 until minute 16:45. I really appreciate you taking the time and cannot wait to see what Bobbie and you have in store for all of us next.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really fun.